So, yeah. I'm going to share a journey with you today that started for me when I was 16 years old. And I sent you a manual and sources. I'm not going to go over that. I'm going to go through the stages of the journey that I've been through. Minhagim that are different in all the different places that I've been. And then I can, if we have time, I can share with you the experience and how it feels to be a member of Hevra Kadisha. So the notion of Hevra Kadisha, I don't know when you first heard of it, but I heard of it at a summer camp, Pi'ula, an evening Pi'ula at camp. They brought in a group of people that were members of a Hevra Kadisha, and they showed everything that you needed to do to perform Tahara and prepare someone for burial. And I was 16 years old, and it was fascinating. And that evening stayed with me for a very long time. Now, at the same time, I had an anxiety, fear, uncomfortable sense about death and dying, and it was a preoccupation for me, even as a child. So when this opportunity came when I was 16, it was the best hula that I was at the camp. So I didn't know where that was going to go. And what's interesting is you never know what experience you're going to have that's going to have a turnaround effect on your life. So that happened at 16, and life went on. I got married. I moved to Teaneck, New Jersey, and there was a posting in the shul bulletin that they were looking for women to participate in Tahara, to become members of the Hevra Kadisha. And I was like, oh, I've heard of that. I'm interested. So basically, in 1989, I wrote to the shul and I said, I'm interested. And they said, well, the next time we have a situation, we'll call you. And so they called one morning, and I was actually pregnant at the time. And I asked if that was okay for me to come, and I observed. And I said, so how do I do this? And basically, the whole process of being part of Hevra Kadisha is a learning process, and it's something that you learn as you go. Meaning there's a manual, but every situation is different. So I observed, and the next time I participated. And it became something that was life-changing for me, because it was a way to do service in a way that helped me confront my anxieties and overcome my anxiety with death and dying, and to do chesed shel emet, which I never imagined what that would be like. So for many years, I was a member of Hevra Kadisha in Teaneck. Yeah, I'd rather tell the journey, then you can ask questions, and then I can go into more detail. So this was, I would get called, I guess, at least once a month, and basically not everything else is aside. You have to be there. There usually were four women, depending on the situation. And it was a very meaningful part of my neshama and my life of service. So in 2003, we moved to Israel and we moved to Yerushalayim. And I was looking for a way to continue to be part of Hevra Kadisha here. And in Jerusalem, it was not a possibility because it's, I don't want to say a mikzoa, but it's a more of a professional track, and you have to be of a certain kind of person. I didn't fit the picture for who was doing Taharot in Yerushalayim. So, okay, I kind of let that go. In 2010, though, we moved to Efrat. And there was an active Hevra Kadisha in Efrat. And so I joined the Hevra Kadisha in Efrat. Parallel to this, I was asked by the idea to help them create a unit of women that were going to help when there were fallen women soldiers. Now, where did this come from? My brother-in-law was a Aluf Mishneh for the Rabbanut, and he was responsible for creating the Ma'arechet to identify fallen soldiers, meaning every soldier that is inducted into the army gives DNA, fingerprints, teeth, and there's a Ma'arechet that holds this information so that if chas v'shalom someone is killed in action or dies, there's a bank, a data bank, and it's men and women. And in 2010, he approached me. He knew that I had experience in Hevra Kadisha as being a member of the Hevra Kadisha, and he said, you know, over the next few decades, there will be more women soldiers that are going to be kravi, and there will be more casualties. And it's not appropriate with the way we're doing things at this point, which is there were male soldiers helping to prepare female soldiers, chalalot, they're called chalalot, actually. And in the army, with the army, it's a little more complicated because there are two kinds of situations that they asked me to be part of and to recruit a group of women. There's a shigra situation where either there's a traffic accident and a soldier dies. There is a suicide and a soldier is nifter. There is a shooting accident. And then there are the situations where they're pigor, right. And then there's chirum. So what my brother-in-law asked me to do was to put together a group of women who had experience, women that had experience with computers and women that had experience with Hevra Kadisha. Now, why the two? There was a ma'arechet that was used, right, by the army. So if there is a soldier who dies in action or by suicide, by accident, it has to be documented by the medical examiner. So all of that information has to be entered into the system, and the cause of death is documented by the medical examiner. Medical examiner needs help moving the body, taking photographs and documenting. So they thought having women that were interested, that had experience with Hevra Kadisha, being able to work with body, and then women that had facility with computers. So I put together, B'kitzur, a group of 16 women that we rotate, and we are trained during the year for emergency situations. Like 3 weeks ago, there was a training for mass casualties. So they have special training for us to do that, and then the shigra. There was one year, I don't remember the year actually, we had finished helping the medical examiner do the report. And I saw a taxi cab as we were leaving drive up, and a group of 4 women, Haredi women, came into the room where we were. And I said, you know, why are they here? Well, they're going to do the Tahara. I said, okay, well, this doesn't make any sense. You have us. We have women who have experience in Hevra Kadisha, so you don't need to bring them anymore. So from that year forward, we now do everything. So we do the identification of the Halalah as well as the Tahara. Okay, so that's the IDF experience. So there's a Efrat, there's the IDF. In 2016, I spent a year in San Diego, and there were 4 women in San Diego that do Taharot. One of them happened to be a very close friend of mine, and she knew that I was coming with experience. I wasn't working that year, so basically that whole year, every week, there was another Tahara. It was ongoing. So that was really, really fascinating and pivotal also. And I came back, and now I do Efrat and I do the army. So that's my personal journey, all the different pieces that I've been through, and it's been life-changing in a sense. So what is it that has to happen for a Tahara? I don't know if you had a chance to look at the sources that I sent. So basically there are 3 parts to completing a Tahara. There's the cleaning and preparation of the body, which means everything from you washing the body, taking off nail polish if it's possible, closing wounds if necessary, everything to prepare the body for the actual Tahara, which is 9 kavim of water that has to be poured over the body, because it's not going into a mikvah, in a one stream, and then there's the dressing of the niftara. So basically, it's similar for men and women up to a point, and I don't want to go into all the details because it's in the manuals that I sent you. I'll share that with you. Usually there are 3 or 4 women that are part of whatever the Tahara that's happening, depending on the situation. So before any Tahara happens, we ask for information about what state the body is in, if there are any medical outstanding difficulties that we will encounter, and that will determine how long the Tahara actually takes. So if there are open wounds, that presents certain difficulties. There are some situations where you can't do a Tahara. Oh, because of the blood. So any blood that comes from the body has to be absorbed and buried with the body. So let's say someone had a surgery and the wound is still weeping. So you need to make sure that is not washed away when you pour the water. So the wounds have to be closed. So that's very interesting, actually. In America, we used this like sealant almost. It was like a liquid that sealed. You painted the,
It's like a liquid Band-Aid.
yeah, a liquid Band-Aid. You could use that. And here they don't use that. We use cotton wool, and you just you close that as much. And it's possible that you can't. And if there's, let's say there are tubes that need to be removed, if you're going to remove the tubes and there will be blood vessels that are going to burst, you don't remove the tubes stay in. If there are catheters involved, that's why every situation is different. And, the more information we get from whoever's handing over the body, that will determine how difficult it is and how quickly the Tahara can happen and what can happen. And let's say it's a gunshot wound. That's much more complicated. And in a lot of times you might just do the water on the hands and not touch the body. Right, because you have to be, the blood is part of the goof. And let's say with the soldiers, let's say we receive a soldier with limbs missing, those limbs need to be buried with the body and the clothes. And also, if someone dies, Kiddush Hashem, there's no Tahara. They're buried with whatever they have been in a pigua. So
and how's that defined? Like, as in, like, do y'all say this was a Kiddush Hashem, or like how? Like,
oh well, look, we if I get a call, last week we got a call. There was a suicide by gunshot wound. That's not al Kiddush Hashem. In the year that I was in America, 2016, if you remember, there was a pigua on the Tayelet, and there were 3 female soldiers that were run over. Do you remember that? Right. So that was, I wasn't here for that, but it was. So that was al Kiddush Hashem. Yeah.
So you have a rabbinic authority, or you can make decisions on the
So depending on who, Rav Roja he's the one that wrote the manual that I sent you. So he's the one that we ask if in the army if there really is a question. Although in the army, when we're called, there are people who can answer the question. If it's really difficult, and he's the one. Like we had a situation where there was a chayelet who died after a long illness, and the skin was so fragile, but there were no open wounds. So we had to ask him, what do you do? And he said, no Tahara.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to give as much information as you can. The other big difference between doing Tahara here in Israel and in America, there are 2 things, actually. Number one, here we bury without an aron, except in the army. Chayalim get buried in an aron, and in America, you have an aron. And so it's the preparation is also a bit different. What else did I want to say? What else was there?
What's different?
Oh, about here. Oh, it's actually quite important. Here we do internal cleansing, which means because there is no aron, you have to make sure that there's no embarrassment during the levaya. So whatever you can do to make sure that there's no leakage. Yeah. So, and in America, we did not do that. We just closed, we used cotton to close everything, but because it was a closed Aron, it wasn't necessary to do the internal cleansing. So you do the best you can. And that's the bottom line. In every Tahara that you do the best that you can. Because this is, this person cannot do this for themselves anymore. It's to make sure that every person has the same, is treated the same. Every met is buried in tachrichim made from linen. Everybody gets the same. It doesn't matter how wealthy you were. It's the same. You come in one way, you go out, and the dignity of the person is foremost in your mind, and it's the last opportunity for this body to be connected with the soul that it has housed for the life that it was here. So there's an awareness of the soul as well as the body. And that in itself is an experience that I would say, if you ever have the chance to be part of this process of the service of doing a Tahara, it's very life affirming. And it's a way that you can actually help that neshama go on its journey. I would say there have been times when it was clear that the soul was present. I can't tell you why I know, I just know. And then the soul went on its journey when the Tahara was completed. And another thing, in America, there are a lot of tefillot that are said during the Tahara. And here we ask Mechila at the end, and that's all that's done. Also in America, there are knots that are tied in specific ways. One of the knots is a shin. There are knots that are not complete knots. And here, the knots are not done the same way, and they're also taken off in the kever. They're not buried with them. So there are differences. So what this means is there are different minhagim, and all minhagim are acceptable in the place where the Tahara is happening. There are three basic components. The body needs to be prepared, cleaned, the amount of water poured in a stream, and the tachrichim, used. Those are the three basic things, and everything else, it depends on where you are. In America, we used to put a mixture of egg and vinegar on the hair. We don't do that here. Why? Because it was a minhag in Europe, how to know the grave of someone who was Jewish, because you could smell the vinegar, because the egg would hold the smell of the vinegar. So there's like that, all these little different minhagim, and everything is acceptable if the basic things are done. You prepare the body, cleanse the body, you wash the body.
Do you have a different protocol if the person is like Sephardi or Ashkenazi?
No, not here. Not that I know of.
Do you get Sephardi as well?
Yeah, but there's a protocol. And
because it's like a different, there's a Hevra, Kadisha, Ashkenazi, and there's
oh,
Kadisha,
no,
Sephardi.
no, not that I mean, in Efrat, it's one for
Oh, there's
everybody. One for everyone, and there are women that are Sephardi, and there are Ashkenazim, and right. So, okay, now I'll take questions if you'd like, if you want me to go into more detail.
said about, like, I'm interested, like, in any point, you finish the Tahara, and then you hand it over, and it happens like in the Bet Lefayot, right? So it's like very close to the burial.
Yeah, yeah.
So then you hand it over to the Kadisha
Right,
guys.
the ambulance that's going to take the Niftara to the Hevra. Or in the army, we hand it over to the soldiers that are going to present this to the families.
Do you have to tell, like, whoever's in charge, like, there was a water or not? I mean, like, or you don't need to go
No.
Like, do the families ask, or you
In
usually
my
not
experience, nobody has asked. If there's a question, we ask the question, and then we just do what we have to do. There was no one asks questions afterwards, because I guess it's assumed that whoever's doing this knows what they're doing, and if there is a question, but usually whoever gives us the body knows what the situation is already. If it's going to be complicated, more complicated than normal. Also, during the Tahara, there's no talking, meaning you're focused on the work that you're doing, and it's the team is working together. And for most of the situations I've been in, it's been with people that I've worked with before. So we each know our jobs. A lot of the time, it's important to talk about that before you go into the room of who's going to do what, what's necessary to do. So a lot of times the tachrichim should be laid out beforehand so that things can move quickly. The pails of water should be prepared. All of this is usually discussed before, of who's going to do what, so that there's no unnecessary talk that happens during it. I'd say in San Diego, when I was there, they had a minhag of using incense in the room, which I had never seen before. And it was like, okay. So I was like, and that was acceptable by the rabbinic authority that said, okay. Just interesting things. Then there are this very difficult situations where I've been part of a Tahara where a pregnant woman died and with the baby, so we had to do both. That was very hard, meaning we had to do the fetus. We had to bury the fetus. No, the fetus was removed. Yeah, this happened in the hospital. So when they brought the body, they brought the fetus as well. So that was very, very sad. And every situation has its own unique quality and story, and a lot of times you learn a lot about the person from how they present. After they've died, you can see things. There was one situation, I hope this is okay that I'm sharing all this. There was one situation where there was a suicide. This was not here, this was in America. And it was clear that this woman suffered greatly. And this was one of those situations where her neshama was there, and the care and the way the team approached her preparation allowed the soul to go on. But you saw the state that she was in, and it was clear that this was huge suffering before the suicide. I can't explain to you why, but that was clear. So, yeah, I mean, every person is a world. And when one person dies, the world dies, you know. So the Hevra Kadisha makes sure that when you leave this world, your body that has housed you, your soul and your dreams and all that you've done is taken care of. And yeah. Yeah.
Just kind of Derek Aga question. I mean, you're talking about how these souls, you feel that they're there and you feel that they leave. Does this also make you think about the concept of ghosts, of souls that their bodies haven't been dealt with as they should be?
So that's an
and
interesting thing. So, you know, sometimes when you're doing a Tahara, there are other bodies that are waiting or that are in America. We shared a chapel with non-Jews were prepared by embalming in the same physical space. So, you know, you could feel sometimes the energy was not great. So you have to protect yourself. And this is something that anybody who does any kind of spiritual work, any kind of therapeutic work, you need to protect yourself from the tipul, from the mitupal, because there's transfer of energy. It's real. And even though the body is not alive, there's still energy there. So you have to protect yourself. So ghosts, spirits, there's other energy going around. So if you're focused in what you're doing and your kavanah is in such a way, and you protect yourself before you go in, then it's less problematic, from my experience. Now, I've worked with women who don't talk about the spiritual part of this. And for me, that's a very important part of the work. So everybody, you know, goes to it differently. But anyone can really be part of a team that does a tahara. Although you can't, if you're a family member, you can't. Family members are not permitted to do that.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like your spiritual and emotional development from the time you started? Like when I'm just imagining myself in a situation of doing Tahara, I can feel that I'm like, wow, there's spiritual skills that like I would need to have that I don't have. And I'm wondering like what are those moments where you felt like, wow, I need something more than what I've got, and how did you develop those skills that you have now?
So I will tell you that even after these many, many years of doing Taharot, it doesn't matter how much preparation or how much experience you've had, there's always anxiety before, because you don't necessarily know what you're going to get into. I will say that when you do work like this, there's a certain koach that comes from just doing this work while you're there, and that goes away. However, in my personal life, meditation and tefillah, those are places where I develop that sense of spirituality, not necessarily through doing the tahara. But it actually helps me, because I know I have the skills to be able to protect myself and to put myself in a different place most times. And that's been a journey of 30 years as well. So it's been a parallel journey in that sense. Um, if you're called to do service like this, it's almost as if when you're going to be a surgeon, you're going to face similar situations. A doctor that deals with geriatric patients or cancer patients. It's a similar. I think it's a similar process, and it's a self journey. It's and then learning from the people around you. The other important part about this is that after the Tahara is over, you don't just leave. You've done something with another group of women or men, and there's a certain kind of, I'm going to call it debriefing, but some situations require talking through what you've all been through, because some of them, it's a traumatic situation. And honestly, these images stay with you for a long time. They don't just go away. But they lessen the impact on you viscerally. But the emotional image is there. And that's okay. In from my perspective, that's okay. Yeah.
So, like to follow up on that, like, what do you do like after the you have like something that you do for yourself? Or do you have to run to work afterwards, or do you, or in the evening, like do you somehow?
Well, first of all, you have to wash your hands.
Right.
That's the first thing. You have to wash your hands.
Yeah.
That's that's actually the ritual that you have to do after you do this. So there's a separation there. Usually, if I'm working with the army, I have a drive home that I can decompress and process. But actually, there's a movie called Departures. It's a foreign film, and it's really, I think it's Korean, where this cellist ends up working for a transportation company. And what is it? He ends up preparing bodies for transportation to the other side. Anyway, it's an interesting film. And in the film, when they finish doing a burial or preparation, they have this huge meal where they eat, and they eat, and not only eat, but they eat with they eat meat, and they eat, it's a very, I can't find the word for it, but it's very striking, and it's the complete opposite of what they've just done, but it gives them life affirmation. I assume, anyway. Departures, it's called. So there are also times that I write for myself how the experience was, because I need to remember, or I need to still process something. And especially with the army, they are very, there are a lot of people who are available to help process these difficult situations. So they don't just let us leave, and so I hope that was okay. I didn't have enough time to prepare exactly all the pieces in order, but I hope that I've shared enough. I have more time if you're interested. If you have more questions, I'm happy to.
Yes, I have questions too here.
Yes, Lisa.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for sharing this very personal experience and such holy work that you're doing. It's very moving, and it's this whole side of you that we don't know. So thank you.
Right. You know, Tlushim and
Yeah, and administrative things, and it's been very beautiful to hear how this touches you personally and the other questions and issues that it raises for you. I don't really know that much about the technical procedure, how it's performed, and I was wondering if you could just give us some of the bare bones, if it's comfortable for you, like how long it usually takes, how many you've done here versus America, and how do you get the water pouring in a constant stream, and what is the issue of the knots? That's something I haven't heard about.
Okay, so as far as the number I've done, I don't know. I haven't counted. I mean, hundreds, maybe over time. 100, I don't know. It's just been since 1989, so as far as the process itself, you'll see I sent an email today. So there's an abridged version of this, and it's in English, actually, English and Hebrew. So it's probably the best thing that you'll go through that. But basically, the niftara is on the table. We open the bag and assess the situation, take off the body bag. Then a sheet is put on top of the body so that the whole time during the Tahara, except for a few instances, the body is covered the whole time. That's important. And then buckets of water are filled to do the washing, and you start on the right side. First, the head is done. You wash the head, and if necessary, you close the mouth and the eyes, and then you wash the right side of the body, starting right side down to the legs, and then you move to the left. You roll the body over to the right, onto its left side, wash the back of the right side, do the internal cleansing, turn the body on the right side to do the left on the back. And then once the washing is done, any nail polish, or we make sure that the toes and the fingers are straight. And then the 9 kavim are prepared. So in the army, there's it's more professional, I would say. There's I'm not going to say a bucket, but there's a conveyor up at the top over the body, which holds the 9 kavim. And when you pull the mechanism, it actually, you don't have to pour the buckets. It's a mechanism that holds the water. So it's much easier when we do this in the army. Now, in one of the manuals I gave you, it says that men are put in the mikvah. So I've never done that. I've never, but in America, they used to do this. The men would be strong enough, I guess, to actually put the met in the mikvah. I don't know if they do that here. I don't know the answer to that.
Sharon, I'm getting married.
No, but not here, not here. Yeah. Okay, so then the 9 kavim are poured over the body. In America, we actually put boards underneath the meta so that the water went underneath. Here, it's not done. I don't know why, just not. Then the body and the table is dried. And then the tachrichim are put on the body in order. So the there are pants that are put on first, and there are no openings at the bottom. The openings are closed, right? So pants are put on. One woman puts one leg, one does the other. And also the sexual organs are also covered. There are coverings for that. And then there's a shirt that's put on. And so one woman puts an arm in one, the other side, she puts her arm in the other, and then you flip over the shirt. Then there's a kittel, which is put on for women also. Because the tachrichim are actually modeled on what the high priest wore. So then the kittel is put on, which is also another jacket. And basically you roll to the left to put the right side on, roll to the right to put the left side on. Then for women, there's a head covering and a face covering. There's also earth from Israel is put on the eyes. In America, actually, we put it on the eyes, the heart, and the sexual organs. Here, it's just right, earth from Israel. And then there's something called the sovev, which goes over under the whole body, and then is covers the whole body. It's wrapped from the top and the bottom, and then the left and the right, so that it's wrapped up. And then here, there are 5 ties that are made with ribbons. Okay, so there's one around the eyes, one around the heart, one on the stomach, and then 2 on the legs. And these are knots that are not closed, so that they are opened at the time of burial. Then I think whoever's putting the person in the, yeah, I've never seen that part. I've never seen that part. So I don't know who does it. I just know up until the part that we do the knots, the ties. Yeah.
They're buried with all of that.
With everything that's put on,
They're
yes.
buried with all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are hand sewn. They're not made by machine. Yeah. And so they're expensive, but what else can I tell you?
Who pays
What?
Who pays for it? Well, here, so I'll tell you in Efrat, if you're a toshav, you're entitled to a burial, and there's no cost to the for a Tahara, You don't get paid to do this. Hevra Kadisha here doesn't get paid. Actually, in San Diego, they gave an honorarium every time you did, but here, not. I assume it's the Moetzah Datit pays for it, and I'm sure we pay for it in our arnona and our taxes. Every toshav in Efrat is entitled to a burial plot. One other thing that I sent you is that burials are being done in machpelot, so it's 2 in the grave. So I sent you the sources for that, so that you would know. And the first time I saw that, I had never seen that before. That one spouse is buried on top of another.
That's not related to the.
No. But that's related to Hevra Kadisha, Moetzah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience of the way that we culturally, at Jews or in Israel in general, relate to death, and how this experience has made you think about cultural norms around that.
I think we have the best um, practice for coping with death from the time of death for the whole year of Shiva. I mean, everything is laid out very clearly, and everything is purposeful for the dignity of the person that has died, and taking the sensitivity of the family that we've left behind. So it's very comforting. All of the ritual that we have, from the body never being left alone, that a candle is lit for 7 days that carries that neshama, to the people that are sitting with that body the whole time until the burial happens, and the people that do the burial, and the actual throwing of the earth on the mat that actually solidifies the notion that this person is going back to the earth, that the roof is back to the earth. And then there's the healing and everything that happens from the time that the mourners step away from the kever. They're encompassed by friends and family that they walk through. And I mean, I think we have a perfect practice for giving death its rightful place. And it is very spiritual, and it's very I think it's meaningful for anyone that goes through the process. And it doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, adult, a child, observant, non-observant, or a gioret or a gior. Everyone is entitled to a tahara and to a Jewish burial. We're all even. I mean, that's an amazing thing. Does that answer you? Yeah.
And, during COVID,
This was
What was
a
the difference?
little crazy. So when COVID happened and everybody was, you remember seeing people in hazmat suits.
Yeah.
So they sent from the army, they sent us a video of what we were going to have to do. They were going to put suits on, and it was crazy. Luckily, there was nobody, there were no halolot at that time, but it was, I mean, there were people that thought this was really a plague, and people were buried separately. So now it's not, I don't think
so
it's
you
an issue.
also didn't have it in front.
Not that I was part of. But no, I would say we were very, very careful. We were very, very careful. We wore double gloves. We wore double aprons. I mean, and you had to be very careful about, masks, of course. Yeah, it was crazy. It made me not want to do this after I got that video. I was like, that is really too much, and it was the masks, the full suits that you couldn't breathe in. Anyway, luckily I didn't have to be part of that, but they did in the beginning. That's how they were doing this, because they didn't know. They didn't know the way this was going to go. You have another question?
Yeah.
It's okay. If I can answer, I'm happy to.
Yeah, let's make two more questions. Do you remember what you felt back in Teaneck after the first time you were next to a dead person and being pregnant? Do you remember that?
I remember it very clearly. So, first of all, I stayed in the background. There was a group of 5 women, and they were all older than me. And I remember there was a really not a pleasant odor that in the room. And I thought to myself, wow, if this is how it is every time, this is going to be really hard. The person that had died was an older person. It was a complicated situation. And so I was standing in the background. I was watching what was going on. I had no idea what this process was. I had no idea. And one of the women called me over, and she had me stand by her side, and she then explained step by step what they were doing. And that made it okay. And it made it was like, I can do this. And I don't have to be afraid of seeing a dead body. And I actually have no, I'm going to say no sensitivity. I don't have any emotional reaction to holding part of the dead body. Okay, so what I've started to do in the last few years is that during the time that I'm with the woman that has died, I make sure to hold her hand. And at that moment, it's really, I want my soul to touch her, to let her know that we've done the kavod with as much respect as possible, and that I'm here. I'm here. There was one situation where it was clear this would not have been the choice of the woman that died to have a tahara. And I felt during that situation in particular that she was embarrassed. Actually, this has happened more than once, that I felt that she could feel embarrassed. And I took her hand, and I tried to relay that it's okay, you're not alone, there's no judgment. And accept, the peace and the love that's being shown to your body. And I'm sorry. And at that point, I always ask for mechila. Even though we ask for mechila afterwards, I try to do my own, because, look, we're manipulating a body, and it's not always pleasant, and it's not always, it could be an affront. So that's my personal way that I approach that. And there was another situation where it was clear that this person would be embarrassed that she was being exposed like this, and I was particularly careful about making sure that she was covered the whole time, and that there was no denigration or judgment. So, and that's a hard thing in life, not to judge anyone. That's something, that's what my biggest goal now in life is not to judge anyone. So that first experience, having the experienced member take me and have me stand there. And then afterwards, she was very cute. She made sure that we talked through what happened. And, so it was an easy way in. And then over the years, I had friends in Teaneck who, I would tell them every time I had a Tahara, and in actuality, three friends of mine that I never thought would do this are now members of the Hevra Kadisha in Teaneck. So it's like, this is good. And then there's these 16 women in the unit, the Manach unit in the army. So I'm happy about that. And they created another unit up north. I've never met the women. And actually this year, we've finally been given the status of Miluim. So that when we have a Targil or a day, we get Miluim. So I joked with my kids, that I finally was inducted into the army, and they were like, well, did you get Madim? And I was like, well, I have my own Madim. And in San Diego, there was a special coat that they gave me. It's like every place was different. So it's been a real journey.
And try to talk you out of
oh
this.
my God. First of all, when I first did this, he was not happy. He was like, why are you doing this? And over the years, he's come to see how important it is for me. I don't usually talk with him about what I've been through, and I don't usually talk about the circumstances, just because kvod hamet, but also he can't deal with it. So he can't deal with it. And I actually made a point of letting my kids know very early on that I was doing this. That's when they were still young, when we were in Teaneck. And so when we came here, it was natural. And then once I was doing this for the army, it was like, oh yeah, Mom, hey, Ima. So I have one son who's in the Rabbanut in the army. So we'll actually be doing Targilim together, which is, it's pretty funny. I mean, this is the funny thing. And, there's a little bit of Black humor in all this, not during the Tahara, but there's, so, yeah.
What happens if you don't? You told me that having like boundaries in this process. What happens if you don't have those boundaries?
Look, it will affect you much more. That's my assumption. Can it affect you physically? Meaning, I don't know the answer to that. I imagine you can let whatever you want in, but you can also prevent energies from entering you. This sounds kind of hooey, so I don't really want to go there, but you just have to make sure that you have the right kind of protection when you do this, and it's your state of mind, and and you ask God for help, and you get help to do this. You definitely get help to do this. So the one other thing that I would say is that, last year you were learning Nida. And, there was conversation about going to the mikvah. And, for me, going to the mikvah was always a wonderful, uplifting, looking forward experience. And so the interesting thing about doing a Tahara is that, well, at least in America, we used white sheets. So in the mikvahs in America, they gave you a white sheet to use, and to wrap yourself in. So during these taharot, I would think of myself as actually being able to give this woman a tahara that she probably hasn't had for 20 years. And it was her last journey to the mikvah. I was able to give her that. And that was it's like, wow, that's amazing. So that's always been, that's another piece in my mind that I hold during this. Is that I'm performing the last Tahara for this woman of something that maybe she's done most of her childbearing years. And it's like, wow, that gives me goosebumps to be able to do that. And that's a zchut, really, really a zchut. So
So fitting that after Shavuot and we read about Ruth, which is on Megillah Shekula Chesed, and Ruth also says, Amech Amich Eloich Eloi, and Asher Tamuti Amut, and that's like Chesed Shelemet, like I'll be bearing with you, and what you're talking about is Chesed Shelemet. It's like
so traditionally it's said that Hashem did the Tahara for Moshe. And he died Zayin Adar. So Zayin Adar is a day of fasting for members of the Hevra Kadisha, because it's doing God's work that God did for Moshe. So I try not to think of this as with gava. I started this because of my fear and anxiety about death. And it was a selfish, reason for starting this, because I needed to come to terms with death. I needed to be able to do that. So for me, it's been a selfish process. But I hope that I've been able to so